Welcome to episode 6 of Code2Clutch. Today we're diving into the world of precision, adrenaline, and ambition, not from the driver's seat, but from the garage. Our guest today is Lucy Gould, the first full-time female mechanic in Formula 2 history. After working her way up through Spanish F4 and F1 Academy with Rodin Motorsport, Lucy now plays a hands-on role in one of the most fastest, demanding championships in the world. From pit stops to persistence, Lucy's story is one of passion. Lucy, welcome to Code2Clutch, and I'm so glad to have you with us.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
So let's start at the beginning. What first inspired you to pursue a career in motorsport? And did you always picture yourself, working trackside?
So, no, I didn't always see myself in this career. I originally actually started pursuing a career in teaching um, and like childcare. And then I think so. My passion for motorsport originally started when I was quite a bit younger. My grandfather has a garage down at the bottom of their house, and he builds his own classic cars down there. So normally he's had a classic Alfa Romeo down in the garage that he's been building for as long as I can remember. So I used to go down and help him as a kid, and well, I was probably more of a hindrance than a help, but I always found it fascinating and would try and get involved. So that's kind of where my interest in cars and maybe the mechanics side of it started. But my grandparents always watched Formula One, so I was growing up around that all the time. So I, you know, watched. I wasn't really interested until I started to get a little bit older, and I like to research, and then I sort of moved on to watching other championships like F2 and IndyCar, and that's when I sort of developed my own interest and passion for the sport, but still didn't really see it as a viable career option until I I did a year in childcare and education and really didn't enjoy it. I was sort of struggling for what course to apply for the following year. And then at the last minute, I decided that I wanted to go and do a course in motorsport mechanics. And that's exactly what I did. Although I only lasted about 6 weeks before I got my job with Rodin Motorsport. So, yeah, that's kind of where it started.
That's such an interesting story. And, I am so glad to hear that you found your niche and it all worked out, Clearly,
Yeah.
it paid off. Uh, so how did your first opportunity with Rodin Motorsport come about? Like, who did you reach out to, and what kind of like work experience? I know you said about, working in a few courses here and there, but what sort of like helped that opportunity come about? And did you reach out to people? What was the path there?
Yeah, so I originally emailed not just Rodin, but many other teams in junior formulas or sort of like club racing levels to try and gain some work experience. I didn't really hear back from anybody. But the good thing about the college that I went to, which was the National College for Motorsport, and the campus is at the Silverstone circuit, you can gain access to the circuit when there's test days or race weekends. So I was able to go to the track when British F4 had a race weekend, and I knew which team I wanted to go and speak to about work experience, which was Rodin, was Carlin at the time. And I went over, spoke to some of the mechanics, asked if, they had any contacts they could give me. They didn't really have anything at the time, they were busy. They let me into the garage to, kind of have a look around. And they said, if you come back later, this evening after we're done, I'm sure somebody will be able to talk to you. So I did. At the end of the day, I went and I stood outside the garage for about 2 hours waiting for them to finish their evening prep. So I looked a bit like a crazy person, just stood there watching them for ages. But it paid off because I spoke to the chief mechanic at the end of the day, and he gave me a few emails and phone numbers of people in the company that I could talk to. about work experience, and they replied and offered me a week in October to go and do some experience with them. And at the end of that week at the factory, I got offered my job. So yeah, it all paid off in the end. But I emailed many different teams to start with, but they didn't really get back. So I had to go and introduce myself in person to try and get myself noticed.
Yeah, and that really shows how much of a role persistence pays off and hands-on experience, of course. So
Yeah.
that you're like basically the backbone of the team, working for like top drivers from Abby Pulling to Alex Dunne. Can you, sort of walk us through what your role as a mechanic actually looks like on a race weekend?
Yeah, so my role on a race weekend in Formula 2 is slightly different to some of the other mechanics because I'm not working on a car 24/7 like they are. So each car has a number one and a number two mechanic, and they're obviously focused on the car completely, whereas I'm also doing some tyres and I'm solely responsible for the fueling of the cars. So I have some other little jobs as well that I'm doing in and around the garage. Um, but yeah, so for example, on a race weekend, we'll turn up to the track either a Tuesday or Wednesday. It depends whether we've had a race weekend before or whether we're traveling by truck or freight. And also just depends on circuit entry. They ultimately get to decide when we have access to the paddock. So we'll turn up on the first day and we'll either set up the garages or build the awning. That's always our first job. And then if we've come straight from the factory, the cars are already prepped, so we haven't got a huge amount to do in regards to them. But if it's been a double or triple header, we'll spend that day and a bit of the next, so the Thursday, prepping the cars, getting them ready for the race weekend, which normally consists of like gearbox off, looking at the ratios and just all that sort of thing, making sure that everything is all correct and working properly. And then on a Thursday, we have car scrutineering and we go to the official FIA weighbridge just to check that the car is legal and they're all happy with that, check the weight, all that sort of thing. We'll also do some pit stop practice on the Thursday and just sort of set the cars up and get everything ready for Friday, which is a busy day for us because we have two sessions. So we'll have practice in the morning, and on a Thursday, we'll make sure that we get all of our grid trolleys ready to take to the pit lane because we're not obviously based in F1 pit lane, but that's where we run the sessions out of. So we have to make sure we have all of the equipment with us that we're going to need or potentially need. Um, so that's another another big job. We've got to make sure that we have everything ready for when we have to go. And then, we'll have our practice session. We'll then come back to the garage, prep the cars again for qualifying, and then do the same with the grid trolleys. Go out for quali, and then we'll prep the cars in the evening. Obviously, we have to wait for Parc Fermé to end. We don't have Parc Fermé after practice, just after qualifying in the races. So we have a period of time where we'll be waiting, getting things ready to do evening prep, and then it'll be like floors off, gearboxes off, checking all of the basics again, and then we'll have our two race days. Sprint races are normally in the afternoon, so it's a slightly more relaxed morning, and then Sunday's the busy day where we've got our feature race in the morning, and then we'll come back to the garages at the end of the race, and we'll have to take everything apart again. So either take down the awning in the garage and pack it all back into the truck or the freight boxes and fly home. So Sundays are always a really busy day for us, just because there's a lot going on. Um, but so there's all sorts of things like making sure you've got the correct tyres, not just to take to pit lane, but on your trolley to take to the grid. There's all sorts going on, but you sort of get into a routine. Um, So you just get used to it after a while. Everything sort of stays the same, which is nice.
Yeah, and that's so much more complex than people realize. And you're working basically like way before the race starts, and it's not just about what happens on race day, it's much more about the previous, prep. And your
Yeah.
work really, keeps the keep moving up. So yeah. And I know that you did last year with F1 Academy and now you've
Yeah.
moved up to Formula 2. Was there any like main difference that you noticed, whether it was in like team culture or expectations? Maybe it was around the female drivers, anything like that?
Um, I think it's definitely helped for me staying within Rodin. I think, as you mentioned, the culture is still very much the same and the expectations are the same. And it's still a big family feeling within the team. Obviously, you're spending so much time with these people, not just at the factory, but when we go away. For example, at the end of the year, we have Qatar, Abu Dhabi, and then the Abu Dhabi test. So that's 3 weeks away um, with these people. So you do become like a close knit sort of family type dynamic. Um, but I think obviously the paddocks are slightly different just because F1 Academy is, a fully female championship regarding the drivers. Um, but everybody in that paddock, got along really well last year. I didn't really have anything to complain about. The different teams all got along and we could all have a laugh with each other and maybe hang out of an evening. But it's very much the same in Formula 2 still. And the all the drivers are really cool and friendly, and it's not sort of what you'd see on social media. Everyone is just relaxed and we all get along with each other. And yeah, it's I think sometimes people forget that the drivers are just regular people as well, so we don't we just get along with them as we would with any of the other team members. um, so that's nice. And yeah, obviously F2 is a another few steps up the ladder from F1 Academy, so there's a bit more pressure on the team and the drivers, but it still feels like a nice, calm, chilled race weekend, which is the sort of what we're aiming for within our team, is just to keep everything nice and calm, really relaxed environment so that we can sort of get the best out of everybody, which is nice. It's not, nobody's ever stressed or, getting annoyed with each other. Everyone just tries to help each other out and just get along, because ultimately, the more that you stress and panic, it's just going to, feel more tense. So, yeah, that's sort of what we're aiming for. But I did really enjoy being a part of the F1 Academy paddock. And that was sort of my first taste of working in and around a Formula One weekend. So it was nice to sort of have that little step in between like Spanish F4 and F2. So it was just sort of like a little taster of what was to come.
Yeah, and that transition sounds really interesting. And how all these series Drive to Survive and the F1 Academy series on Netflix, they portray such a rivalry between people to make it more dramatic,
Yeah,
but it's so nice. And obviously, since you said the team feels like a family after a point.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting to hear from somebody, who's been there for years. And I know that you are the first full-time mechanic, female mechanic in Formula 2 history at just 20. What has it been, navigating that? And does that milestone sort of feel like a responsibility? Or, do you have any pressure that comes with that?
Yes, it was when my team manager told me, it was a bit of a surprise at first. I thought there would have been more females that had worked in an operational role like a mechanic in Formula 2. I know there's been engineers, just not mechanics. So it was a bit of a surprise, and I sort of had the feeling of if I don't succeed or do well, is it gonna just, give sort of like a bad name for women in motorsport? So I guess there is a little bit of pressure, but I do just try and look at it like I have any other championship I've worked in, um, just to kind of forget about all that sort of thing, just just sort of work normally as I have been. Um, and everything seems to be going all right at the moment. Obviously, there's been, the few interviews about it, and I always get a bit nervous about that. But just trying to portray the team and the championship and myself in a good light, which I hope I've been doing, and sort of just encouraging more young people, not necessarily just women, but to get into motorsport so we can just create more of a diverse environment. As previously, it has been very male dominated. So it is good seeing initiatives and championships like F1 Academy, and what F1 Academy are doing for young girls in karting as well. And yeah, it's been really good to see more young women getting involved in motorsport. And I think grassroots at the moment is where it is super important, getting young females, girls into karting, so that there's obviously we have female drivers now that are doing F1 Academy, but the only way it will succeed is if we get more girls interested now, so that that championship can continue in the future. So I think what they've been doing with the karting is really really good at the moment, and I think we are still every year seeing an increase in female involvement in the sport. So I think it's the future is looking really really positive for women in motorsport, and I think just diversity in general.
Yeah, and that's honestly so great to hear that it doesn't feel like, it's the sort of differentiating factor that your gender really determines, the work that you do in the paddock. And, do you have any advice for, women who want to step into these engineering and mechanical roles in the paddock?
Yeah, so it was very intimidating at the start. I was really nervous about how everybody was going to not necessarily treat me, but whether I didn't want to sort of step into the environment that they'd been in for a while, and then they suddenly had to change how they were within the team. But it was super. I've only ever worked with Rodin, so I can only speak for that as a team. But it's such a positive environment there. I've never, felt treated differently to anybody else. Um, Everyone's super kind and helpful. Nobody wants to, they let me get on with my work. They don't want to, come and say, oh no, this is how you should be doing it. Obviously, if I want some help or I'm struggling with something, I'll ask just like anybody else. But, lifting tires or whatever, I don't want somebody else to come over and do it for me, because, that's part of my job. I can do it myself. But they quickly learned that if I needed some help, I would ask. They wouldn't have to, come over and check on me. And it's nice to, feel like I have that independence like anybody else. I was a bit worried about that at the start, whether they'd see me as, weak, but I haven't felt anything like that. Um, I think that's quite a common misconception about women in motorsport, is that they can't do the same things as the men do. We can, obviously, we're, built different. It's just genetics, but it yeah, it's been a lot better than I thought it was going to be. Um, well, completely different to how I thought it was going to be. And I think for just anyone trying to get involved, um, yeah, women especially, is don't necessarily listen to what people say or what's online. It's not a sport or a career just for men. Anyone can do it. And if it's something that you are really passionate about, and you know that that's the career path that you want to go down, just like I did, email and get into contact with as many teams as possible at all sorts of levels of motorsport, just to get your foot in the door. Because once you have that opening, that first connection, everything then becomes slightly easier. You then get to know more people in and around the paddocks, and the industry, and everything sort of slots into place, and you can figure things out from there. But it's just making that first step, which is difficult. And I don't think that just applies to women. It is a tricky industry to get into. But yeah, once you make that first step, it all becomes a little bit easier.
Yeah. And that's such practical, advice for somebody who really needs to hear that, for someone who really wants to break into these roles. And, we're sort of like at the end of the interview, but I just want to know, with I know that right now Alex June is still in the fight for the F2 championship title, and the season's sort of at the next half. As we wrap up, I would love to hear, does Rodin have any specific areas that they're targeting over the next few races? And do you have any personal goals, with the upcoming races of the season?
I think for everybody, obviously, we are all super competitive. Everybody wants to win. And I think that goes for every single team, driver, personnel throughout the grid and every championship. Everybody's there to win and to do the best that they can. Um, and like you said, the top of the championship standings in F2 at the moment is still really close. So I think the goal within Rodin at the moment is, just to uh, sort of get the maximum out of everybody, perform as best as we can, um, and yeah, try and win that championship with Alex. But yeah, the competition on the grid at the moment is still really strong. So we're just gonna have to go out there and do our best and keep doing what we have been doing. And Alex he's been really good this season so far. He's a really really cool person, and I'll wish him all the success in his career. Um, and I think he's made it quite obvious to everybody, that he will have a successful career in F1 and motorsport in general. Um, but yeah, for the team, we all just want to go out there and win and do the best that we can. So I think that's the goal at the moment, is just to see how it goes over the next few races. Um, but like I said previously, we don't want to put too much pressure on anybody. We just want to keep the environment the same as it has been throughout this year. That seems to have been, working. So yeah, we'll see how it goes, and yeah, we're looking forward to going racing again at the end of the summer break.
Yeah. Lucy, thank you so much for, joining me and giving us like a look into what goes on behind the scenes, in the garage. And it's one of the most essential and sometimes overlooked roles. Mechanics are the heartbeat of the garage. You guys are working like end to end to keep the team going steady. And it's so amazing to hear from somebody, firsthand about their experience. And I'm really grateful for you to, share your journey and the work that you're doing and the path that you're carving, I would say. It's so interesting, watching the championship and then getting to know what goes on behind the scenes. And yeah, I'll be cheering you on and I'll be cheering Rodin as well every step of the way. And again, thank you so much for joining me, Lucy. It was so great to hear from you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and I look forward to seeing how your career plays out as well. You've been doing some really cool stuff at the moment, so I'm looking forward to seeing how that all progresses as well.
Thank you so much.